So we had an incredibly messy week here at Aldersgate. Vacation Bible School was this week, and it was messy. I hope you got in here early enough this morning to see the video, but we had a great week. That was the theme of Vacation Bible School, messy. And I know you've been thanked, but I just want to do it again. If you helped out in any way this week, if you were here volunteering, if you brought snacks and goodies, if you prayed, if you did anything, thank you, thank you, thank you. It was an incredible week. You'll hear more about it here in just a second, but we just want to thank you so much. So we launched this new series last week in conjunction with Vacation Bible School titled Messy. Messy people who make up a messy church impacting a messy world. The church, when it's healthy, is... The church, when it's at its best, is... messy. We showed you this image last week that we want you to hang on to, and because sometimes as Christ followers, as Christians, as church people, we just want to insulate ourselves from the rest of the world. And so we showed you this image last week. We did it live last week where we took and we bubble wrapped Michael Christian. I think we're going to show that to you here. And made the point that that's how we live oftentimes as Christ followers, is we just want to put ourselves in a little safe, comfortable, warm, Michael informed us that it was very hot, cocoon, and not worry with the mess of the world. If that didn't set with you, then I want to show you a couple more visuals this morning that may help you understand what we try to do sometimes as Christians, because sometimes it looks like this. We just want to sanitize everything, right? So if we can keep our, how many of you use this like 100 times a day? How many school teachers are about to go back to work? That's what we do as Christians. We just feel like if we can put some on and rub our hands and do that several times a day, that it just keeps us sanitized. It makes it more perfect and just less messy. Sometimes we do it like this. Sometimes we're lazy, so we use these. The point is, we just want this nice, clean, safe, sanitized world. And that's not the world we live in. So during this sermon series, we're challenging ourselves to look at ourselves as messy people who make up a messy church and bring impact to a messy world. This morning, we're going to continue the prayer that we challenged you last Sunday. I hope you've been praying it every day this week. What is it? God, send us to those that nobody sees or wants. I encourage you to write that down. Put it in your notes on your phone. Every day we're asking you to pray that prayer. God, send us to those that nobody sees or wants. This morning in particular, we're going to talk about God sending us to those in poverty. Those in poor conditions. I'm going to be all over the Bible this morning. I hope you're okay with that. So here's what I would encourage you to do. Get a pen. You'll find there in the seats in front of you. Get a piece of paper, maybe your Life Together guide that you got this morning when you came in. Get your phone out. Open your notes section so that you can jot a lot of these scriptures down. We're going to hinge it around one verse. I'm going to put it up on the screen for you, and then none of the rest of them are going to be up on the screen this morning. One verse comes out of the book of 1 John, chapter 3, verses 17 and 18. 1 John, chapter 3, 17 and 18. Here's what it says. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth. But if anyone, let me just say that includes all of us, okay? But if anyone, if any one of us, if anyone who has the world's goods, let me say to you again, that includes all of us. There has never been a time in history then the divide between those who have and those who do not has been bigger than it is now. If anyone who has the world's goods and sees his brother in need. Now, John is addressing those in the Christian faith, those who are Christ followers, but we can know that he's also referring to those outside the Christian faith, or those who aren't yet Christ followers. So anyone who has goods and sees a brother or someone in need, yet closes his heart against him. How does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed or truth. Here's what he's saying. Let us not just say we love others. Let us get messy. Let us not just say that we love the world. Let us go to a messy world. Let us just not talk about love. Let us get our hands dirty. Let us get messy. Let me give you some context on the book of 1 John. 1 John is a book that's written that addresses questions about God. Namely, am I a Christ follower? You guys ever struggle with questions about God? Questions about your faith? It's okay to, that's okay, right? And let me share a story with you. Amy and I were, this week we had to go to an out-of-town funeral. It was a very sad, tragic situation. Some friends of ours that used to live in Lubbock used to go to church here. We were in a small group with for a very long time. They lost their 19-year-old son in a tragic accident where he was jumping into the San Marcos River. And terrible. So we go to the funeral. It's on Thursday, and Stan Cosby, who's actually the pastor at St. Stephen United Methodist Church in Amarillo, was one of the speakers. And when he got up to speak, here's what he said. He said, Bryce, like any other 19-year-old, was struggling with questions about his faith. That's what we all do at that age. And then he said this, are you struggling with questions today? He said this to a room of people who were gathered together to mourn the tragic passing of a 19-year-old. Of course we were struggling with questions about our faith and about God and how this could happen. And that's what the book of 1 John is. It's a book that talks to us about struggling with our faith. In particular, struggling with whether we are really a Christian. Have you ever been there? Am I really a Christ follower? Is this all real? Does this all really exist? Is this, you've been there, right? And in 1 John chapter 2, I'll take you back. You can jot it down or you can turn there if you're on your phone or your Bible. 1 John chapter 2, here's what we read. And by this, we know that we have come to know him. If you ever wondered, am I really a Christ follower? Am I really a Christian? By this, I'm going to get to this in just a second. By this, we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commandments. Whoever says, I know him, but does not keep his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps his word, in him truly the love of God is perfected. By this we may know that we are in him. Whoever says he abides in him ought to walk in the same way he walked. Obviously, Jesus is he. By this we know that we have come to know him, if we keep his commandments. Well, count me out. I can't do that, can you? Can you keep all of his commandments? I can't keep all of his commandments. So what gives here? One day Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus replied, love God with everything you've got. Oh, and there's a second that's just as great. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love God and love people. By this, we know that we belong to him. If anyone has goods and sees another in need and doesn't give, doesn't love, you see where I'm going with this? If anyone has goods and sees their brother in need, but doesn't find it in his heart to give, to reach out, to get messy, to get their hands dirty. In fact, in the end, Jesus said, we'll be separated into two different groups. By the way, you can find this in Matthew chapter 25. In two different groups. To one group on Jesus' right, he's going to say, you can spend eternity with me in heaven. To the other group, the group on his left, he's going to say, I never knew you. Well, how do we get in the group on the right? Jesus said in Matthew chapter 25, did you feed those who were hungry? Come stand on my right. Did you give water to those who were thirsty? Come stand on my right. Did you clothe those who were naked? Give home to those who were without shelter? Come stand on my right. You see, what Jesus is saying is, did you care for those in need, those in poverty, those that are living in poor conditions? Now, there were some other things. Did you visit those in prison? We'll get there next week. Did you take care of those that were sick? Keep my commandments. Care for those who are in need. In fact, when John the Baptist, who was the forerunner, was in prison, the forerunner to Jesus, was in prison, he sent his disciples to Jesus. You can find this in Matthew chapter 11. He sent his disciples to Jesus to ask Jesus, listen, buddy, I'm here in prison. I want to know if you're the one that I'm really here for. Are you the real deal? Are you the one? And he sent his disciples to ask Jesus and then said, come back and tell me. And Jesus said to them to take back to John the Baptist. He could have just said, I'm the one. He could have done some big, fancy miracle, but here's what Jesus said. You go back and report to John the Baptist that the blind have received their sight. The lame now walk. Lepers are cleansed. The deaf hear. The dead are raised up. And the poor have the good news preached to them. The poor have the good news preached to them. So here's what I want to do for the remainder of this sermon this morning. I want to tell you about the good news and 3 things that it teaches us, 3 things that it grows in us, 3 things that it transforms us to reach out to those in need, to those living in poverty, to those who are living in poor conditions, to help us love God by loving his people. Here's the first of those. The good news is that it frees us from work and also to work. The good news frees us from work and also to work. Now you're going, what in the world is he saying? All right, listen. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. For by grace, Ephesians 2:8. For by grace you have been saved through faith. And this is not your own doing, it is a gift of God. Not a result of works, so that no one can boast. Here's what Paul is saying in Ephesians 2:8 and 9. He's saying, you cannot earn your way into heaven. Now, wait a minute. You just said that Jesus is going to say to those on his right, well, you took care of the hungry. You took care of those who were thirsty. You took care of those who didn't have clothes. You took care of those who were homeless. Listen, we cannot earn our way into heaven. The only way we enter into eternal relationship with Jesus Christ is through grace. It is a free gift. There is nothing we can do to earn it. Listen, I'm fixing to set some of you free. You cannot go to church enough. You cannot go to Bible study enough. You cannot behave good enough. There's only one thing and one thing only, and that is the grace of God. My favorite definition of grace. There's nothing that you can do that will make God love you anymore. There's nothing that you can do that will make God love you any less. It is by grace and grace only. This week at Vacation Bible School, the last day, I got the privilege of teaching the story to the kids. It was from Acts chapter 16, Paul and Silas. Remember the story where Paul and Silas were thrown in prison? They had delivered an evil spirit from this young girl who was able to predict the future. And so the men who owned her weren't happy when that happened. And so they were losing money. So they threw Paul and Silas in jail. And Paul and Silas, scripture tells us about midnight, they were praying and singing. And about that time, an earthquake came. And it just shattered the jail, shattered the prison, rattled everything. It took their shackles off. It freed them from their hands and their feet and wherever they were bound. But they didn't run off. They sat there. And the jailer went running in to Paul and Silas because back in this day, anyone who was responsible for watching prisoners knew that if the prisoners escaped, they too could be thrown into prison, or even worse, they could be killed. And so the jailer went to check on Paul and Silas, saw them sitting there in the prison cell without their shackles on. They hadn't run off. And he had one question because he knew that only God could have caused this. And here's what his question was: how can I be saved? You know what Paul and Silas said? Well, you need to start going to church on Sunday. There's a good Bible study that meets. It's only for women, but you can probably join, and so go on. You need to brush your teeth every day. No. Here's what Paul and Silas said: believe in Jesus Christ. That's it. See, there's a gospel, the good news, that frees us from work. Listen, I am truly setting some of you free today. There's nothing you can do to measure up. There's nothing you can do to earn it. There's nothing you can do to be good enough. There's not enough checklists that you can get marked off. It's a gift that God gives to you. We had several children receive that gift this week at Vacation Bible School. That's what it's all about. The gospel that frees us from work, but it also frees us to work. Watch, Paul keeps going in this thought. For by grace you've been saved through faith. You can't do anything, it's through grace. Verse 10. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. We are saved from works and saved to works. We are freed from work and freed to works. In other words, because of the good news, because of our relationship with Jesus, we don't have to do anything to earn his love. But because of his love, we can't help but love on other people. To get messy. The good news frees us from work and frees us to work. Here's the second thing I want to share with you. The gospel, the good news, delivers us from a sense of have to a sense of want to. The gospel, the good news, delivers us from a sense of have to a sense of want to. Let me ask you a question. You have things in your life that you have to do. Do you have to mow the yard? Do you have to do things at work? Like there are things at work that you want to do, and there are things at work that you have to do, right? Am I connecting here? Am I getting anywhere? How many of you have parents or grandkids? Do your kids have things that they have to do? Like make their bed, take out the trash, brush their teeth, right? And don't you just wish as a parent that you could get them to want to do those things? Right? Do you think sometimes our Heavenly Father looks at us and goes, man, I wish their heart would move from a place of have to a place of want to. I wish they would want to do this, not feel like they have to do this. You see, that's what the gospel does, is it frees us from the attitude of have to the attitude of want to. Jeb, Amy, and I, last night, we took a break from our crazy week, and we went out with some friends, and we watched a movie. We saw Jason Bourne. Have you seen it? Great movie if you like the Bourne trilogy. It just continues in that. Now it's the Bourne quadrilogy, and so it's a great movie. I encourage you to go see it. And if you know anything about Jason Bourne and the Bourne trilogy, man, those are intense movies. Like when you're watching these movies, I mean, they are action from the beginning to the end. There's no time that you really relax or rest. I mean, it's just suspenseful all the way through the movie. And if you don't know this about Amy, she's not one for suspense in movies. So last night was very hard for her. And so when we go watch movies, she likes them. She just doesn't always like the suspense. And so when we see movies like that, I mean, she will take my hand and squeeze it like really, really hard. Like sometimes it goes numb because I think she squeezed all the blood out of it, you know. And if there's a really, really, if it gets more intense, she might jump and lean into me or, grab me real close. And so this happened all night last night through the movie. Jeb's sitting to our left. And so when we get ready to leave, we're walking out of the movie theater, and we're talking about how intense the movie, and Jeb says, yeah, I feel sorry for Dad. Mom was all over him. I said, Jeb, that is a want to, buddy. That is not a have to. Right? That's how God wants us to be. He wants us to want to, not feel like we have to. You got it, buddy. That's awesome. Any of you see TV and every once in a while you're watching your show and you're really watching it so you don't have it recorded and you're fast forwarding through the commercials on your DVR, and in one of the commercials you get that Humane Society commercial that comes on with that stupid Sarah McLachlan song. You know what I'm talking about? I have a love-hate. We have 2 dogs at our house. I have a love-hate relationship with them, right? But by the time I get through watching that commercial, I'm like, come on, let's give some money. Let's save those pets. Something happened to my heart while I'm watching that commercial where I no longer feel like I have to, but I want to. Sometimes we hear statistics that move us from a place of have to want to, like this one, that 80% of the world's population lives on less than $10 a day. We spend that eating out every day. 1 out of every 2 children, 50% of all the children born around the globe are born into poverty. 1 out of every 2 kids born into poverty. 10.6 million children die before they turn 5 years old. Primarily related to issues around poverty. Poor living conditions, unclean drinking water, no access to vaccines or simple medical care. All related to poverty. Let me bring it a little bit closer to home. 15% of those that call the United States home live in poverty. 15%. Texas is bigger and better. 17% of Texans live in poverty. And Lubbock, 20% of the people who live in Lubbock live in poverty. 1/5 of our population lives in poverty. Today is an exciting day at Aldersgate. We're going to put school supply kits together. Man, when you leave here in just a second, you're going to grab a backpack and you're going to open it and you're going to go down the assembly line. One of everything. It's really simple. And then at the very end, the most important thing is there's a little note of encouragement. I'll try to get mine out here. You just take this note and you grab a pen and you find a place that you can sit somewhere or rest somewhere on a table and just write a note of encouragement, and you stick it in this backpack. And then we're going to distribute these to 2 different elementary schools. One of those schools, listen to this, one of those schools that we're partnering with, 70% of the children live in poverty. 70% live in poverty. Now, sometimes we hear statistics and they're all just numbers, but let me ask you more directly. What if it was you? What if it was your child? What if you lived in a place where you knew that if you found out you were pregnant, your child had a 50% chance of being born into poverty? What if you knew that your child had a high likelihood that he or she wouldn't even make it to their 5th birthday party? What if you knew your kid would go to school and get made fun of because he couldn't afford the school supplies that everybody else has? What if it were your child? According to Giving USA, in 2015, It was a banner year for giving in the United States. Giving went up across all domains. But I want to share something with you. Giving to Sarah McLaughlin and the Humane Society went up 6%, while giving to the church went up 2%. Which may explain in Lubbock why we have a facility like this one that takes care of our pets, and a facility like this one that takes care of our neighbors. The gospel frees us from having to wanting to. That God does something in our hearts. That when we begin to pray that prayer, God, send me to those that nobody else sees or wants. That we begin to get up and move. And quit wiping hand sanitizer over everything. And get our hands dirty. Because we find that we have goods. And we find that other people have needs. And we know that while we're not saved for our works, God created us to meet those needs through our works. Maybe we need to begin praying that God would change our have-tos into our want-tos. Third thing I want to share with you, just really briefly. The gospel doesn't call us away from treasure, but to treasure. The good news doesn't call us away from treasure, but to treasure. Let's be honest, because sometimes when we begin to listen to messages like this, sometimes when we begin to read the word and it begins to tell us things that we may not be settling well with, that it may cause something to disrupt our routine, that it may change our comfortable lifestyle, we feel like we're going to have to give up too much. But the message of the good news is not that it calls us to give up treasure. It calls us to treasure. You see, in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus said, "Don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where they can easily be destroyed, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where they will live for eternity. For where your heart is, there your treasure will be also." I by nature, am not a very giving person. I don't like to give up things, and I don't like to give to. I married someone who's completely opposite. Her love language is giving. Lucky me, right? And so during our time together, she has transformed my thinking on this. She has challenged me to go from a have-to attitude to a want-to attitude, and helped me to see that it's not giving up treasure, but it's gaining treasure. I'll be honest with you, last week I shared about our whole debt experience and going through that. One of the things we did, in fact, the first thing we did going through that was we began to tithe. That didn't make any sense whatsoever. And I'm going to tell you, back then when I first wrote that check, because that's how long ago it was I wrote checks, that was hard to do. But guess what? Over the years, God has transformed my heart from a have to a want to. From giving up treasure to gaining treasure. And when I give my tithe to this church, I love doing it because I know it's going to impact a messy world. It goes places locally like Hope Community of Shalom in the heart of Lubbock, where those who live in poverty can come to the clothes closet. They can come and get a meal every Sunday evening. And at the same time they get the meal, they get the gospel of Jesus Christ presented to them. And someone is there to pray for them. I know that it goes to places like the Bridge of Lubbock, which is over on the east side, and does the same thing over on the east side of Lubbock, reaching out to those who live in poverty and those who live in poor conditions. I understand that it goes to backyard missions, who take our giving and they go to places where people are living in structures that are unfit to live in. And they do small repairs just to keep them warm and dry. That things that we even have at Aldersgate, we have a backyard mission that you can get involved in. It goes to places like Grace Campus. The tents that I just showed you earlier in Tent City, Grace Campus now, they're doing some remodeling out there. They're building some tiny homes. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Lowe's Home Improvement Store finished the first one yesterday. And guess what? Yeah. And guess what? You don't have to sit here and applaud Lowe's because you too can go build a tiny home. If you want more information, check out our e-newsletter. It comes out every Wednesday. There's information in there on how you can get involved in building a tiny home and getting messy, seeing someone in need and seeing that you have goods and realizing that you can get out and help. It's because I know that when I give to this church, it goes to missionaries like those in India. And AIM for India and our mission team that just came back from there, the poorest of the poor, that's educating children and teaching them about Jesus. We had another team that just got back from Costa Rica to serve those that are poor, to take care of children who've been orphaned and abandoned. That it goes around the world to places like Vietnam and the Philippines, to Mexico, to Guatemala. But listen, here's where I want to challenge us today. Sometimes it's so easy to just write that check or go online and give or drop it in the drop box on your way out. But does that really get your hands dirty? Oh yeah, I'm glad to give to the church, because I know it goes to places that are a mess. But what am I doing to get messy? What am I doing to get my hands dirty? Am I spending more time here or here? The sermon's going to end here. And you may think, well, this is an odd place to end the sermon. No. It's just the beginning. Where are you going to go and see need and get your hands dirty? You are the sermon.